Hi, my name is Mr. Pete, and I am currently a fourth grade teacher. I'm reading Louis Sachar's Holes, and today we are going to start chapter 16. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've been with me along this whole entire journey, I appreciate it. To my class, of course, this is awesome. Thank you so much. And I do want to say that we are starting to get into this. We're starting to dig a little bit into the hole to find out what this story is all about. I know that it's kind of a slow burn at the beginning with little things happening, but this gold tube seems to have spurned this camp on. Let's find out if it's actually something or if we still have a ways to go. Chapter 16. As Stanley entered the rec room, he could hear X-Ray's voice from all the way across the room. "See what I'm saying?" X-Ray said. "Am I right or am I right?" The other bodies in the room were a little more than bags of flesh and bones, dumped across broken chairs and couches. X-Ray was full of life, laughing and waving his arms around as he talked. "Yo, caveman, my man!" he called out. Stanley made his way across the room. I want to go back up. The other bodies in the room were little more than bags of flesh and bones. That is a metaphor comparing bodies to bags of flesh and bones. Ew. It also could be a little bit of hyperbole there. They're tired, but, you know. "Hey, slide on over, Squid," said X-Ray. "Make room for the caveman." Stanley crashed on the couch. He had looked for a hidden camera in the shower. He hadn't seen anything, and he hoped the warden hadn't either. "What's the matter?" asked X-Ray. "You guys tired or something?" He laughed. "Hey, keep it down, will you?" groaned Zigzag. "I'm trying to watch TV." Stanley glanced uncertainly at Zigzag, who was staring very intently at the busted television screen. All right. Highlight intently, a vocabulary word. Intently means you are very focused. Okay. And I think this, if you haven't started figuring out, Zigzag is struggling with all this. He's a little, you wonder, like, is there some mental health things going on there? Like, he's definitely, he just sees things in a different way, and he's literally watching a TV that's not turned on. But of course, these are boys who are out digging holes all day, and that's all they do. So you can almost understand. X-Ray, of course, has tons of energy because he didn't do anything. He didn't even find the gold tube. So all these other boys are beat down, and X-Ray's bouncing around with all kinds of energy for his first day off since he's been in camp. We have that space with a gap in time, and let's move on. The warden greeted the boys at breakfast the next morning and went with them to the holes. 4 dug in the holes, and 3 tended to the wheelbarrows. "Glad you're here, X-Ray," she said to him. "We need your sharp eyes." Irony there, because we know he doesn't have sharp eyes, but he did find the gold tube, so the warden is still being super nice to them. Stanley spent more time pushing the wheelbarrow than digging because he was such a slow digger. He carted away the excess dirt and dumped it into the previously dug holes. He was careful not to dump any of it in the hole where the gold tube was actually found. He could still see the tube in his mind. It seemed so familiar, but he just couldn't place it. He thought that it might have been the lid to a fancy gold pen. KB could have been the initials of a famous author. The only famous authors he could think of were Charles Dickens, William Shakespeare, and Mark Twain. Besides, it didn't really look like the top of a pen. By the way, Charles Dickens, a fantastic author who wrote The Christmas Carol, Scrooge, amongst other things. Oliver Twist. William Shakespeare, one of the most famous playwrights of all time from England. In the 1600s, and he wrote things like Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, Henry V. And of course, Mark Twain, who many consider the greatest American writer of all time, who wrote The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. All 3 fantastic authors who you all should read. So maybe I'll read some of their works here for later use. By lunchtime, the warden was beginning to lose her patience. She made them eat quickly so they could get back to work. "If you can't get them to work any faster," she told Mr. Sir, "then you're going to have to climb down there and dig with them." After that, everyone worked faster, especially when Mr. Sir was watching them. Stanley practically ran when he pushed his wheelbarrow. Mr. Sir reminded them that they weren't Girl Scouts. They didn't quit digging until after every other group had finished. I'd highlight by lunchtime the warden was beginning to lose her patience. You can see that as she's losing her patience, she's kind of pushing the issue a little more, although she's treating Mr. Sir worse than the kids, just like she was doing with Mr. Pendanski. But she is losing her patience a little bit. Later, as Stanley sat sprawled across an understuffed chair, he tried to think of a way to tell the warden where the tube was really found without getting himself or X-Ray into trouble. It didn't seem possible. He even thought about sneaking out at night and digging in that hole by himself, but the last thing he wanted to do after digging all day was to dig at night, too. Besides, the shovels were locked up at night, presumably so they couldn't be used as weapons. Highlight presumably. Presumably means that's why you think it should be done. It's not always the way it's done, but that's why you think it should be done. Mr. Pendanski entered the rec room. Stanley, he called as he made his way to him. His name's Caveman, said X-Ray. Stanley, said Mr. Pendanski. My name's Caveman, said Stanley. Well, I have a letter here for someone named Stanley Yelnats, said Mr. Pendanski. He turned over an envelope in his hands. It doesn't say Caveman anywhere. Thanks, Stanley said, taking it. It was from his mother. Who's it from? Squid asked. Your mother? Stanley put it in the big pocket of his pants. Aren't you going to read it to us? Asked Armpit. Give him some space, said X-Ray. If Caveman doesn't want to read it to us, he doesn't have to. It's probably from his girlfriend. Stanley smiled. So, Stanley is fitting in so well that he's defending his name, and X-Ray is sort of defending him because he gave him the tube. So Stanley does have some cred here that he didn't have before, which is kind of interesting, especially when you consider that in his previous life, he was just bullied and a loner. Okay, so we have those three dots there. We're definitely going to have a shift in time. It's interesting that the spaces happen everywhere, but usually when you get those stars, it's noting a space at the bottom of a page because sometimes it doesn't look like a space. So this is the author's way and the publisher's way to show you there is time happening. It's the same thing as a space happening in the middle of a story. He read it later after the other boys had gone to dinner. Dear Stanley, it was wonderful to hear from you. Your letter made me feel like one of the other moms who can afford to send their kids to summer camp. I know it's not the same, but I am very proud of you for trying to make the best of a bad situation. Who knows, maybe something good will come of this. Your father thinks he is real close to a breakthrough on his sneaker project. I hope so. The landlord is threatening to evict us because of the odor. I feel sorry for the little old lady who lived in a shoe. It must have smelled awful. Love, from the both of us. What's so funny? Zero asked. It startled him. He thought Zero had gone to dinner with the others. Nothing, just something my mom wrote. What did she say? Zero asked. Nothing? Oh, sorry, said Zero. Well, see, my dad is trying to invent a way to recycle old sneakers. So the apartment kind of smells bad because he's always cooking these old sneakers. So anyway, in the letter, my mom said he felt sorry for that little old lady who lived in a shoe, because it must have smelled bad in there. Zero stared blankly at him. The nursery rhyme. Zero said nothing. You've heard the nursery rhyme about the little old lady who lived in a shoe. No. Stanley was amazed. How does it go? Asked Zero. Didn't you ever watch Sesame Street? Stanley asked. Zero stared blankly. Stanley headed on to dinner. He would have felt pretty silly reciting nursery rhymes at Camp Green Lake. Hopefully you've heard that nursery rhyme. I know when I was a kid, I heard that nursery rhyme. And if I can find one or if I can read it really quickly to you, I'll put it right here.
There was an old woman who lived in a shoe, by Jean Cabrera. There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children and animals too. Bertha, Martha, Sky, and Bob, Eric, Edith, Esme, Pob, John, Jane, Jack, and Jill, Kai, Rosa, and Baby Bill. There was an old woman who lived in a shoe, and when the children were hungry, she made them a stew with potatoes and coconut and carrots and peas, and she kissed them all lovingly when they said, "More, please." There was an old woman who lived in a shoe, and when the car broke down, they rode anew. They all held tight, sitting side by side, and she kissed them all lovingly at the end of the ride. There was an old woman who lived in a shoe, and when the clothes got tatty, she'd mend and make do. What fabulous clothes, such colorful cloth, and she kissed them all lovingly when they showed them off. There was an old woman who lived in a shoe, and when the furniture broke, she stuck it with glue, and hammered and nailed and screwed here and there, and she kissed them all lovingly from her wobbly chair. There was an old woman who lived in a shoe, and some days were just a big hullabaloo. So much noise, what a messy muddle! But all was made better by a big, soft cuddle. I love you. That was There Was an Old Woman Who Lived in a Shoe by Jane Cabrera.
If I couldn't find one, well, I didn't. But I do think it's interesting. Again, they're digging in the wrong place. The warden is getting nuts about it. X-Ray is still treating Stanley really well. And he got a letter from Mom. He's defending his name. But in the letter, you can see that his mom was put at ease by the letter that Stanley sent to him. And Zero is interested in the letter, but has never heard of the little old lady who lived in a shoe, which is a nursery rhyme that lots of kids hear. So why would the author put that in there? What are they trying to tell us about Zero specifically? And for those of you that haven't heard Little Old Lady Who Lived in the Shoe, it could be a connection to you. It's probably not, though. They're trying to show a difference between Stanley, who knows about it, and Zero, who doesn't. So what would be the difference between the two? Realizing that when this book was written, the internet wasn't a thing, and there were a lot less ways for kids to maybe be entertained when they were younger. Sesame Street, when I was a kid, was huge, because when I was a kid, there were 3 channels: ABC, CBS, and NBC. And then there was also PBS, and I would watch PBS all the time, and I'd watch Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and Electric Company. So when this was written, especially by the author Louis Sachar, again, the internet hadn't exploded the way that it has. So maybe nursery rhymes were a bigger thing when Louis Sachar was younger. So just kind of keep that in mind. Why would the author put that in there to show the differences between Stanley and Zero? Okay? All right. So we are going to move on from there. We know they're not going to find anything related to the tube. At least I don't think they are. So what's going to happen next? How mad is the warden going to get? We shall find out tomorrow. Maybe, if we're lucky. At least in the next chapter. I don't know. We'll see. Spoilers? All right. Thank you so much for joining me. Please hit that subscribe button. Tell a friend and have them hit the subscribe button too. Hit that bell, and I will see you on the next page. Peace.